We present crossing the human-robot embodiment gap with sim-to-real reinforcement learning using one human demonstration. Human-like dexterous hands have the potential to enhance robots' manipulation capabilities, but their complexity makes many existing methods designed for simple grippers inadequate. Previous work has leveraged the morphological similarity between human and robotic hands by directly recording human hand motions as demonstrations and learning state-action correspondences via imitation learning. IL requires high-quality data to be effective, and thus typically requires large-scale, labor-intensive data collection processes via teleoperation or using specialized wearable equipment. Videos of humans interacting with objects with their own hands are inexpensive to collect and much more scalable, but human videos lack action labels. To generate these, a common approach is to obtain human hand pose estimates throughout the video and convert these to robot action labels via fingertip retargeting and inverse kinematics. However, human hand pose estimation from videos can be noisy, and even with perfect pose estimates, it can lead to infeasible or suboptimal IK solutions on the robot. These are particularly punishing for contact-rich dexterous manipulation tasks. Reinforcement learning offers a promising alternative to overcome these limitations by allowing robots to learn manipulation tasks using its own embodiment. However, tedious task-specific reward engineering and unfavorable sample complexity makes real-world RL challenging. Our work thus seeks to answer the question, how can we leverage sim-to-real RL to learn dexterous robotic manipulation with minimal human effort? In this work, we introduce Human2Sim2Robot, a real-to-sim-to-real framework which trains a dexterous manipulation policy from a single human hand RGBD video. Human2Sim2Robot addresses the limitations of existing methods. It only requires one human video demo and removes the requirement on high-quality robot action labels, which is easier to collect and scale. The robot learns a strategy optimal for its own embodiment with RL and simulation, and our RL policies demonstrate successful zero-shot transfer with only a few minutes of human effort. For the human demonstration, we record an RGBD video demonstration of the human expert performing a task with their own hands, tracking the object pose trajectory and extracting the pre-manipulation hand pose. Then, in simulation, we transfer the real environment to a digital twin for RL policy training, where the robot is rewarded for following the demonstrated object pose trajectory initialized at the pre-manipulation hand pose. Finally, we deploy the trained policy zero-shot with sim-to-real transfer to a real robot and dexterous hand to execute the demonstrated task. We show that these policies enable a wide range of tasks, including grasping, non-prehensile manipulation, and extrinsic manipulation. We demonstrate some of our tasks on regular geometric objects like a snack box, and other challenging objects like a pitcher for handle grasping, as well as manipulating a thin plate. We also successfully train policies that compose multiple skills, such as plate pivoting, grasping, and insertion into a dish rack. To elaborate on our method, we begin with the human video demonstration, from which we extract two task-specific components. First, an object pose trajectory, an embodiment-agnostic, object-centric task specification that provides a dense reward that is difficult to reward hack. And second, a pre-manipulation hand pose, a prior and guidance for learning human-like approach behaviors by initializing the robot at the retargeted position from which the human approached the object. With these components, we don't need any reward tuning for different tasks or objects. We extract these two components as follows. First, from the RGBD video demonstration, we additionally generate per-frame object masks using SAM2 and a scanned object mesh using Curie Engine, an off-the-shelf LiDAR scanning app. We pass the corresponding RGB, depth, and segmentation mask frames and the 3D object mesh as inputs to Foundation Pose, a state-of-the-art 6D pose estimation model, to generate the object pose trajectory. Second, we pass the RGB video frames into Hammer, a state-of-the-art hand pose reconstruction model, and leverage the corresponding depth images to perform ICP registration with the reconstructed manual key points predicted by Hammer to obtain our pre-manipulation hand pose. Here is an overview of the end-to-end demo processing pipeline for a sample task. We first extract the object and hand mask from the RGBD video using SAM2. Then we extract the object pose trajectory using Foundation Pose and hand pose trajectory using Hammer. Note that our framework uses just one pre-manipulation hand pose. We then take a scene scan using off-the-shelf LiDAR scanning apps to transfer the real scene to a simulated training environment in Isaac Gym. We train the RL policy with PPO and simulation, using the object pose trajectory from the human demo as reward guidance and the pre-manipulation hand pose, as seen in the left image, as an advantageous initialization for learning. In these images, the green picture indicates the current object pose from the demonstrated trajectory, compared to the current object pose represented by the white picture, which we use for reward computation. During training, we employ domain randomization for parameters such as table and object friction, object mass and inertia, object initialization pose, and initial configuration of the robot arm to facilitate sim-to-real transfer. Our reward with respect to the goal trajectory from the human demonstration is computed as follows. We define 3 anchor points in the object's local frame, represented by Ki, which can be jointly used to determine the 6D object pose. The agent is rewarded for moving the object along a goal trajectory by minimizing relative pose distance defined in the given equation. Here, L is a distance parameter for orientation. We use L equals to 0.2 for policy training across all tasks. After training and simulation, we use zero-shot sim-to-real policy transfer to deploy the trained policies on a real-world KUKA arm with an Allegro hand. At inference time, we perform real-time pose estimation using foundation pose. The RL policy takes object pose and robot proprioception as input, and outputs an action consisting of a palm pose and hand position. This action is passed to a geometric fabric controller that generates joint PD targets executed by a low-level PD controller, which enables smooth coordinated motion while effectively avoiding undesired collisions with the environment. We now show the capabilities of Human2Sim2Robot across a variety of real-world manipulation tasks. All of our robot videos are played at 1x speed. For prehensile grasping tasks, our policies enable the KUKA arm to successfully grasp the plate, lift it, and insert it into the rack. We see some in-hand manipulation here to achieve a more secure grasp on the plate, allowing it to successfully be inserted into the dish rack. On a pitcher pour task, the robot is able to leverage the human pre-manipulation hand pose and object-centric rewards to successfully grasp and lift the pitcher. Here we see that it follows the trajectory as shown in the human demonstration. We now showcase real-world rollouts on non-prehensile and extrinsic manipulation tasks. For non-prehensile pushing tasks, the robot successfully pushes the snack box and plate to the wall 100% of the time. The robot also pivots the snack box against a static wall and can compose pushing and pivoting, succeeding 100% of the time. On a more complex multi-step task that composes multiple skill types, the robot pivots the plate, grasps and lifts it, and inserts it into a thin slot in the dish rack. It succeeds 86.6% of the time, due to the challenging rack insertion step. We break this task down into 3 steps: pivot, lift, and rack, and give fractional success rates if it partially completes the task. For example, a pivot and lift without racking achieves 0.66 out of 1 for a single trial. Here, we analyze some qualitative behaviors arising from training RL policies in simulation and deploying them zero-shot in the real world. With exploration in RL, the policy learns a strategy optimal for a robot hand with larger fingers and higher friction fingertips than a human hand, thereby successfully crossing the human-robot embodiment gap. On the left, the robot learns to use its knuckles to push the plate across the table, instead of following the human to use its fingertips, as they can get caught dragging on the table due to their high friction. On the right, the robot learns to clip the plate in its fingers, as it's hard for the Allegro hand to manipulate the plate in the exact same way that the human hand does, as it has a retracted thumb. Thus, the policies can leverage the demonstrated human behavior as a useful guiding strategy for learning, but training policies with RL allows for deviations from this strategy where it is necessary. In addition to successfully crossing the embodiment gap, Sim2Real RL enables policies to better handle out-of-distribution states and recover from near failures. On the left, the robot is able to adapt to an initial object state not shown in the demonstration and recovers from a near failure. On the right, similarly, the robot can adapt to the plate being placed out of its initial reach and recovers from a close failure to successfully complete the task. Here, we demonstrate that our policies are robust to a large variety of visual distractors, such as background changes, lighting changes, and distractor objects, as well as physical obstacles and perturbations. This is a benefit of training our RL policies with low-dimensional 6D pose observations, rather than images, as well as introducing random forces during simulation training. For our baseline comparisons, many one-shot imitation learning methods from human motion require retargeted trajectories to replay open loop or learn a direct mapping from observations to retargeted actions. To demonstrate the strengths of sim-to-real RL, we contrast this with extracting the hand key points for every frame of the human demonstration. We use these to perform inverse kinematics to get the robot configuration at each time step so as to match these target key points, illustrated with colored spheres. We then reconstruct a retargeted trajectory on the robot by interpolating between these per time step IK solutions, which we use for our baselines. We compare Human2Sim2Robot policies with 3 baselines: replay, object-aware replay, and BC. For replay, we simply replay this trajectory open loop. For object-aware replay, we warp the retargeted trajectory by the transformation between the initial object pose in the demo and at test time. And for BC, we perform object-aware replay 30 times and train a diffusion policy on these demonstrations. For snackbox push, though this task is fairly simple, all 3 baselines struggle due to inaccuracies in hand pose estimation, causing the fingers to drag along the table and get stuck. We see that retargeting strategies often struggle when applied to robot hands with large morphological differences, particularly for contact-rich tasks. For snackbox pivot, all baselines were fairly successful on this relatively simple task, as the successful robot strategy aligns with the human strategy. For snackbox push pivot, the baselines are sometimes successful, but generally less consistently so than our policies. For plate push, like snackbox push, hand pose estimation errors cause the high-friction Allegro fingers to drag and get stuck on the table. For plate lift rack, hand pose estimation of the 4 fingers is often challenging when occluded by the plate, causing unintended contact before grasping. This demonstrates the challenges of nearly imitating actions or rolling out trajectories open loop for precise manipulation. For plate pivot lift rack, our long horizon task, the baselines generally struggled, though object-aware replay was able to successfully pivot the plate. Overall, we see that occlusions and modeling errors can make these hand and object predictions inaccurate, resulting in unintended table collisions or hand configurations that are not suitable for our tasks. This was especially the case for the thin plate that is challenging to manipulate. For picture pour, while the baselines were somewhat decent, simply following human actions does not always lead to the most successful pouring motion, as failing to track the object trajectory ultimately leads to an unsuccessful pour. Therefore, learning a mapping from observations to retargeted actions is often unsuccessful. We conduct several ablation studies to verify the design choices of our framework. We first study the impact of dense object trajectory tracking rewards for training our RL policies. We do this by comparing to 3 modified ablations. Fixed target computes the per time step reward with respect to the final object pose. Interpolated target replaces the per time step object pose trajectory from the demo with an interpolated pose trajectory between the initial and final object pose. Downsample trajectory reduces the temporal resolution of the dense object trajectory from the demo into a series of waypoints. As we can see from the ablations, for a long horizon task involving pivoting the plate rather than trying to pick it up directly, the fixed and interpolated target ablations fail to capture this strategy. The downsample trajectory, being a sparser reward function, struggles to learn the task as robustly as our dense object pose trajectory. Overall, these demonstrate the necessity of object trajectory tracking rewards for the success of our framework. Next, we study the usefulness of a pre-manipulation pose initialization obtained from the human demonstration. To do this, we compare to a default initialization pose far from the object, an overhead initialization directly above the object, and a pose identical to our pre-manipulation pose but 20 cm further away. Due to exploration challenges, the default initialization pose far from the object struggles to complete the task. The overhead initialization, while closer, is not a good prior for grasping the thin plate, thus it also struggles. The faraway pre-manipulation pose similarly struggles with exploration challenges due to the distance. Thus, this shows the necessity of a good pre-manipulation post-initialization close to the object to facilitate learning via RL. Finally, we test the sufficiency of a single pre-manipulation hand pose. We compared the two approaches requiring the full hand pose trajectory. First, adding a hand trajectory tracking reward for RL, and second, learning a residual policy over the open loop retargeted trajectory. Adding a hand tracking reward facilitates learning but converges more slowly because it initially focuses on improving hand tracking rewards. After convergence, it does not show substantial improvement over our method despite requiring additional data and supervision. The residual policy is substantially worse due to hand pose estimation inaccuracies, causing a poor base motion that is challenging to learn an effective residual policy for. In contrast, our method is able to effectively and robustly learn the task without the full hand pose trajectory. To conclude, we present some common failure modes of our method, particularly with challenging objects like the plate. In this example on the left, despite leveraging the human pre-manipulation grasp faithfully, certain angles for scales like insertion are challenging due to kinematic differences of the robot. Next, pose detection noise can affect policy performance. In this example on the right, the real-time pose prediction of the plate flipped in the z-axis during execution, ultimately causing the policy to fail. Future works can explore addressing these limitations, and overall our real-world robot performance, baseline comparisons, and thorough ablation studies demonstrate the strength of our method. Thank you for watching our video.